Croquette is an artist who paints anime girls. She mixes classical Renaissance paintings with a Japanese anime art style. Her portraits, aside from being very beautifully detailed, can also be very simple. She uses an almost oil-painted finish for her pieces and utilizes warm, almost sun-kissed colors most of the time. There are many different techniques she uses to draw like this, but in today's video, I want to analyze her coloring technique specifically. At first glance, her coloring may seem complex and almost impossible to replicate, but there are a lot of little things going on beneath the surface that may help us do this. I couldn't find much time lapses on her style, but I did find a couple work-in-progress pictures and this video. So from this clip, I deducted 3 things. 1, she uses rendering, a technique that I have been actively trying to avoid since I started digital art. Rendering in digital art is the process of taking a painting from a rough state to a more polished, finished state. Rendering is usually done in several distinct stages. It is mostly concerned with working on lighting, shading, and adding details and textures. It usually never uses line art and instead builds on top of a sketch layer. I always use line art in my pieces, so this study was a major step out of my comfort zone. The next thing I noticed was how she starts at the face and makes her way down. This seemed really interesting to me, and I realized she had the entire piece mapped out before she started rendering. She had a solid sketch of the composition along with the colors and shadows she was going to be using. Since this study is mainly focusing on her rendering techniques and not her use of light and shadow, I chose to only focus on this, but she also had her light and shadow along with the basic background laid out. The third thing I deducted was how glossy and almost jelly her art looked. At first glance, you don't see this, but the more I looked through her pieces, the more I realized that she loved to draw water and overall glossy, lollipop kind of drawings. You can see what I mean in these drawings, like the strawberry, the apple, and the almost translucent finish of the fingers. And one more thing I noticed was her hair rendering. It is immaculate. The colors are so perfect and match the character perfectly. She uses pigtails a lot, and when she doesn't, the hair is flowy and free. I collected some of my favorite portraits of hers and tried to find patterns I could add to my own study. I wanted to combine the jelly-like aspect with the pigtail hair and the overall softness of her pieces. Her art reminds me of Jolly Ranchers in the best way. Another thing I want to add before we move on to the actual study is how realistic her rendering is and how she brings it down to earth by adding these black outlines. I have seen other artists do this before in their pieces, and I think it's so cool. It really emphasizes the stylized aspect of her portraits while also maintaining the beautiful painterly style of it. Her style is random and dynamic and is held together with these outlines. So moving on to the actual drawing, I had to find a reference first. I saw this strawberry girl on Pinterest and I immediately thought it was perfect. It had that vintage element to it that really resonated with Croquette's art, along with the strawberry that contributed to the jelly style of it. And then I went a step further, deciding to torture myself by drawing the frills of the dress too. Cause you know, I'm already going out of my comfort zone, why not take an extra step? So I sketched a girl with pigtails inspired by these pieces and began to block out the colors. I chose muted light colors for the basic sketch and decided to make them darker as I continued painting. Another thing I want to add is how I used 2 brushes for this entire painting. I know most people think that brushes are a key factor when creating digital art, and that is true most of the time, but I feel like we give them too much credit. There were a lot of difficulties when I was doing this study, but one of them was definitely not my brush. So I would recommend to find one brush that works for you and stick with it. I feel like when people use too many brushes, it starts to look kind of tacky. After I finished drawing out her face, I kind of layered on colors. I moved on to her eyes. This was a lot of fun, especially since Croquette had posted a picture with a bunch of different eyes she had drawn, and I was able to easily analyze them. I feel like she first added light colors and built on top of it with darker and darker colors simply to define the overall shape. I then moved on to the hair, where I made it a lighter pink shade of the strawberry. I added some random shadows since this drawing does not have a definite light source. After I was done defining the overall shape, I moved on to adding the outlines, and when I tell you this was satisfying, it was so satisfying. 10 out of 10. I'm going to implement this into my own art. So after that, I decided to work my way down into the hands and tried to utilize Croquette's realistic shading. I added a muted brownish color for the shadow and outlined the edges with an orange to give it that sun-kissed glow. I then moved on to the corset, and that was inspired by this picture I found on Pinterest. I tried to add as much detail as I could without going insane. Guys, I don't know how she does it. This is crazy. I'm at the 2-hour mark and I'm not even at the strawberry yet. After I was done with the corset, I moved on to the skirt. I did the same technique that I did on her skin, using a light color for the shading and defining it with a darker color. I made sure to keep it a light beige though so it wouldn't clash with the strawberry. I kind of struggled on the ends of the skirt, deciding whether or not to give it pleats, and overall just decided to leave it as it is and kind of give it a flowing look. This skirt is inspired by Victorian skirts that women wore at home, simple but elegant. Can we please bring back Victorian fashion? It was so gorgeous. Anyways, I added some juicy highlights throughout to make it look jelly, and then I moved on to the strawberry. So torturous, it took me an hour for the strawberry. I chose multiple shades of red and kind of layered it in onto the outline like a painter would. I was watching many oil painting videos while doing this, and I realized another thing about Croquette's art. She hardly uses the airbrush tool and mainly layers different colors together, holding it all with these black outlines that we talked about earlier. After I did that, I added some white highlights that were not quite white, but were more of a pink. But hey, color theory always wins. I then moved on to the leaves, which were perhaps more torturous than the strawberry itself, but I pulled through and then I tied it all together, just like Croquette, by adding a dark red outline around the entire piece. I added some finishing touches that I forgot to record, but what I basically did was add an overlay layer and airbrush some red onto her legs from the glare of the strawberry. I also added some red lipstick because I felt like her mouth looked non-existent compared to her skin tone, and I'm super happy with how this turned out, even though it wasn't even close to Croquette's style because she's just amazing at art. I highly recommend you check her out. She has an Instagram and I think she also has a Twitter, but her art is so beautiful, guys. Like, she's definitely up there on my top 10 artists. And overall, I learned a lot from this study. I hope you enjoyed following along with me on my art journey. I've got a lot of upcoming videos planned, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. And don't forget to leave a like if you liked this video. Anyways, thanks for watching, and leave any questions you have in the comments. I love talking to you guys. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye!